question, change your life. When it comes to planning your life, I want to get you to learn to ask 3 questions now. And the first one is not, what am I going to do? The question you want to ask yourself is, what do I want? What's my outcome? What's my result? The first one is to get you focused on the target. The target is not the activity. The activity can change. It's what's the result I'm after. If you know exactly what it is you really want, what you desire, what you're really after, clarity is power. The more clear you are on specifically what you want, the faster your brain can get you there.
This episode is brought to you by RPM, the Rapid Planning Method. It's the system that Tony personally developed to make a plan for his life and create his $6 billion business empire, write best-selling books, travel the world for his events, and still have the time and energy to spend quality time with the people he loves most. We have a special offer for podcast listeners. Go to TonyRobbins.com/RPM and use the promo code POD20 to receive $20 off the Rapid Planning Method. That's TonyRobbins.com/RPM. The discount code is POD20.
What does it take to successfully create a lasting change in your life? The first step is you got to have a vision for what it is you really, truly want. Something has the power to pull you. Push requires willpower, and willpower never lasts. What will last is having something so exciting, so attractive, something you desire so much that you have a hard time going to sleep at night and you get up early in the morning to a rocket and take it to the next level.
Welcome to the Tony Robbins Podcast. You're listening to an episode that's part of a special season where we explore the 5 areas of life that many people focus on improving at the start of a new year, like health, productivity, career, relationships, and their finances. Today, we're taking a look at one thing that's top of mind for most people: money. Money is what makes the world go round, and it's also what stresses a lot of us out. In fact, 85% of Americans say they worry about their financial situation, whether it's mounting debt, not having enough money set aside for unexpected expenses, or having enough to retire. But even when we do feel financially comfortable, we have enough money to meet our needs, pay our bills, save for our future, and even accumulate wealth, one thing remains true: having more money does not guarantee happiness. In this episode, we're talking to Liz Weston, a financial planner and columnist at NerdWallet, who's going to give you practical tips about how to save more money, pay off debt, and get ahead so you can focus on making progress in other areas of your life. But before we do, here's Tony on the meaning of true wealth and why it's important to consider that meaning as you build it.
Now, what do we want when we say we want money? You want little pieces of paper with pictures of deceased notables? I don't think so, right? You want what you think money's going to give you: freedom or security or opportunities for your family or the ability to contribute to other people. I mean, money can be portable power. Money can be a lot of things, but it's whatever we make it up. It's almost like a shapeshifter. Whatever you throw on money, it's what it becomes. I always tell people money doesn't change people. It makes you more of what you are. If you're mean and you got a lot of money, you got more to be mean with. If you're truly generous and that's your nature and you have more money, you'll be more generous. I mean, there's more resources that are coming through you. But to me, really what we're talking about in real wealth is, what is it that makes you feel truly abundant? What makes you feel totally alive? What's life on your terms look like? Because everyone's different. Some people's idea of wealth is a beautiful home with a white picket fence and 3 beautiful children. Some people's idea of extraordinary life is writing beautiful poetry or growing a garden or building a multi-billion-dollar business and employing people and producing resources. There's no right or wrong. The question is, what's going to light you up? Because I can't tell you how many people, including billionaires, I interviewed 50 of them over a period of 3.5 years. And I would not say they all aren't happy, because that's totally not true. You can be rich and happy. You can be poor and you can be happy. I always tell people problems and happiness have no relationship. So really we're talking about true wealth is between your ears. It's your brain and your heart working together. And it's defining what does life on your terms look like, and then putting a plan in place that really makes that happen, and then making sure you're truly enjoying along the way. The challenge is we all have a 2 billion-year-old brain. And it's not trained to make you happy. Your brain is trained to make you survive. So survival means I got to look for what's wrong all the time, be prepared for it so I can fight it or flight from it. And in reality, we don't have a saber-toothed tiger to fight off anymore. So now people get stressed, even when they have money, because they think about, what are people thinking of me? Or do I have enough money? When the average American who's in dire straits, and I don't want to see anybody in dire straits. You know what? I feed 100 million people a year for the last 2 years. I'm going to feed 1 billion people through my partnership at Feeding America. I care. But I also know that if you're in poverty in this country, you're in the 1% of financial people. You're not the 99%. You're 1% of the world. So the resources are available, but what we don't do is appreciate it enough. We let little stuff stress us out and big stuff stress us out. So you don't just wait till someday when you have a certain amount of money and then you're happy, because a lot of people get that amount of money and then they go, is it still enough? Or what don't I have? Or what's happening with my family? They still find a way to be stressed. So money's not the solution. It's a vehicle. And if we use it right, it can enhance the quality of life. But we've also got to control these two things, the head and heart, in order to have the quality of life that we really deserve.
True wealth means something to everyone. We all have our own idea of what an extraordinary quality of life is going to be and what financial freedom is going to help us to do and achieve. So how do you figure out what true wealth means to you? Here's Tony again.
You sat down and said, what does life look like on my terms? What would my ideal vision for my life be like? And you took 5 or 10 minutes, I do with people all the time. Most people with just a little bit of prodding or a little bit of state change, where they're not in their head, most people can start to list out what they'd want for their life. But what I found is life on your terms, extraordinary life, whatever it is, you need 2 master skills to really achieve that quality of life and sustain it. Like anybody can get rich. Staying rich is a different thing. And when I say rich, I don't just mean financial. I mean emotional, spiritual, physical, right? So the 2 skills are, number 1 is the science of achievement. The science of achievement, I call it science of achievement because it is a science. Anyone who applies the principles of science can get the same result. So there's a science to wealth. When I wrote Money Master the Game and Unshakable, I said, okay, instead of me doing this from my perspective, I've worked with Paul Tudor Jones, one of the top 10 financial traders in the history of the world, a guy that in 1987, when the market dropped 22% in a day, made 200% for his clients that year. I mean, I know a lot. But what if I go to everybody? What if I dig under everybody and find out what it is? And what I found was all these people invested in different ways, but there were certain fundamental things in common. Same thing with health. Everyone is biochemically unique, right? But at the same time, there's certain fundamentals that you and I, while we're unique, if we violate those rules, it's a science. You're going to have disease or low energy, dis-ease in your body, right? If you align with them, you're going to have abundance of energy. You're going to have passion. You're going to have intensity. You're going to have that physical vitality that can make you even more successful. So there's a science to achievement. If you said, what does it take to achieve? The kind of person who wants to read a book like this, who goes to a seminar, they're always looking for the edge because that's what made them the best in the world at what they do or really great at what they've done. But there are 3 fundamentals I can tell you at the most basic level. Think about this. Think about something, and maybe in your own life. Think of what's something in your life today that once was a dream or a goal or seemed impossible. And I think all of us have that. So it could have been something as simple as, growing up and maybe a car represented, especially for a lot of guys, a car was that first symbol of I've achieved something, at a certain level, right? And you got that car and it seemed impossible, or the job, or starting your own business, or a relationship. What seemed difficult or impossible or seemed beyond, you now live. Some people not even take those things for granted. The law of familiarity is the thing we also have to watch out for if we want to be fulfilled, because the law of familiarity says if you're around anything enough, you tend to take it just a little bit for granted. You got that brand new car. It was so exciting. That new car smell. You drove by the plate glass windows in the bank and saw yourself there. And then you get your first scratch and your brain goes, oh my God, I can't believe this. And you're so upset, but you have to get over it. So you try to forget about it. And it's so painful. And then you get your second scratch. By the time you get your 4th scratch, it's a car. It's changed. So familiarity gets in the way of it. I always tell people, if you look at the most basic key to achievement, it's that you become obsessed about something. You start to think about it constantly. You start to desire it. In other words, you focus on it. Focus is power. Wherever focus goes, energy flows. And so most people are focused on what they don't want instead of what they do want, so they experience more of that. So if you get obsessed about something, you can't stop thinking about it. Your brain kicks into gear to try to figure out how to do that, even if you don't have a plan. I've talked to so many people and said, what's something you couldn't get out of your head? You wanted it so bad, it seemed impossible. And yet somehow it came together. The reason is there's a part of our brain. It's called the RAS, Reticular Activating System. Big words. Called RAS for short. It's the part of your brain that notices things. That there's millions of things going on around you, millions. There's pulsation in your ear. You don't think about it, to mention the skin touching your clothing, the people walking by. But the RAS only makes you look at the things that really matter most. So an example would be if you buy a car or you buy an outfit and suddenly you see that car outfit everywhere. Those cars and outfits were always all around you. But now your RAS says, I own one of this. It's important. So you see it everywhere. Well, the same thing's true when you say, I want this. I desire this. Your brain can start to create a plan. That's step one. Step two is really fundamental. Sometimes you get by without it, but usually it takes massive action. If you dream about it, you put your focus in it, you want it, all of a sudden your brain goes crazy. You start reading a book, you talk to people, you ask resources, you go on the web, you do the research. And if you take massive action strongly enough and you keep changing your approach when it doesn't work, if you flex your approach, you'll find what's effective. So step one is obsess, get totally focused, unleash your desire. That gives the energy. Step two is not waiting. It's massive action. Keep changing your approach until you find effective execution. If you're running east looking for a sunset, I don't care how positive you are, you're not going to see the sunset. It's just not going to happen. So you got to have a proven strategy and you can get there faster. So when you have that plan and you keep changing your approach, I always tell people, how long would you give your average kid to learn how to walk? Before you turned to the kid and said, dude, it's never going to happen. You're not a walker. Just give it up. Right? People go, you're crazy. My kid's going to keep trying until. Well, that's really step two. You keep changing your approach until you find it. And then the third step to achievement really is as simple as it may sound. If you're obsessed, you know what you want, you're taking massive action. Maybe you modeled somebody, figure out the right action so you get there quicker and you're executing. You still need a little grace. Some people call it luck. You call it God. But I really believe that there's the part we do and then there's the part that comes to us. But I do know grace shows up a lot more when you do the first two steps on your own. And grace shows up a lot more when you acknowledge grace in your life, when you acknowledge that I was born in a world where I didn't have to build this internet that I can pull out of my pocket the answer to anything on earth. I am driving on streets I didn't pave. I'm reading books I didn't have to write. That's the gift of our lives. And I think when we experience that grace, we don't just experience more achievement, but we start to experience more fulfillment.
You might have heard reports that a recession is right around the corner. So how can you grow your wealth even during a time of economic uncertainty? Now, more than ever, Americans are becoming increasingly worried about an economic recession. In fact, despite the strong economy we're currently in, 2/3 of adults fear a downturn could come in 2020. You might remember 2008 when the financial crisis ravaged the global economy. You may have lost money or your whole retirement, or maybe you were just entering the workforce and couldn't find a job because companies weren't hiring. It's easy to become anxious because it sounds like the sky is about to fall. Instead of living in fear about what could happen, prepare for it instead. As Tony says, anticipation is power. And there are 4 strategies that most of the world's greatest financial minds have used to grow their wealth over time, even through bad economies. Tony calls them the core 4. And while everybody, of course, has a different financial situation, these simple strategies apply to everyone. Tony explains the core 4 in his New York Times bestselling book, Unshakable. Unshakable is a step-by-step playbook that can transform your financial life, no matter your salary, stage of life, or level of wealth, and outlines how to put together a simple, actionable financial plan. To kick off the new year, Tony is offering podcast listeners a free hardcover copy of Unshakable. You just pay shipping and handling. Go to www.unshakable.com to order your copy. You just heard Tony talk about the psychology behind growing your wealth. But what if it's hard to make ends meet on a daily basis? What if you're struggling to pay off debt, pay your rent, or save money for the future? We talked to Liz Weston, a personal finance columnist for NerdWallet, to talk about how you can get the most out of your paycheck. She is a certified financial planner and the author of 5 books about money. You might have seen her on TV shows like NBC Nightly News and The Today Show, and the articles she's written published in the Associated Press and the LA Times. Here she is with 5 saving tips that you can implement immediately. But first, a quick disclaimer. The opinions and content of all hosts or guests and any products, solutions, or services are not the opinions, recommendations, or positions of Robbins Research International, aka RRI, implied or otherwise, and RRI does not guarantee any results or returns based on the information received from any guest's content, products, or services. This podcast is for educational use only. There is no expressed or implied guarantee that any actions recommended apply to your specific situation in the present or at any later time. It is not the intention of this podcast, Anthony Robbins, or any guest on this podcast to recommend any specific financial advisor.
You must choose your own competent financial advisor.
I think the most important thing to keep in mind is willpower is overrated. It's tough to make those decisions every month. Okay, now I'm going to save. Now I'm going to save. A much better approach is to automate it. Set it up so the money is coming out of your paycheck or the money that's coming in without you even being aware of it. So that's how 401ks work, right? The money comes out of your paycheck. You don't even see that. Try that with your other savings as well, your emergency savings or saving for a down payment, whatever you're doing. Set aside that chunk of money, either every week, every paycheck, every month, however you do it. Have it automatic. It will just be gone. And another important approach is to hide the money from yourself a little bit. Out of sight, out of mind. If you have the money at a different bank than where you have your checking account, that alone can really help. So at NerdWallet, we have recommendations for online banks where you can funnel your money. You set up these automatic transfers, they go in, and you don't see it. I like to name the money as well. So I'm telling you to automate it, hide it, and name it. I have little nicknames on all these little sub-accounts on my online bank. So there's money I'm putting aside for the holidays, for vacations, for property taxes and insurance, the boring stuff. But it's all set. It's all in one place and it's all labeled. So it kind of helps with the temptation to go in there and take the money. If it's labeled for vacation, you're not going to want to take it for something else. So that's using a behavioral quirk called mental accounting to actually work for you instead of work against you. You put these labels on the money and then you know what it's for. A couple other things you can do is to lock it up. That's why one of the reasons that 401ks are so successful is there's a penalty for taking that money out. So you know that penalty is there. You're aware of it. It can help you keep your hands off the money. And if you think about it in terms of savings, you could lock up your money in a certificate of deposit. Doesn't pay a whole lot, but there is a penalty if you try to take that money out too early. And then finally, my favorite little hack is something a girlfriend taught me, which is she went through all of her spending and she looked for places where she could save. She cut a bunch of subscriptions she wasn't using. She called her cable company and got a better rate. She negotiated better rates on their cell phones. Instead of just letting this money go back in her checking account and spending it, she totaled it all up and then set up an automatic transfer. So that amount of money would go out of her checking account into her savings. So she diverted it. So those are the 5 things that I suggest people do, that they automate it, they hide it, they name it, they lock it up if necessary, and they divert it.
So if you make the commitment to saving money, you automate it, and you figure out the best place to put it, how do you know how much to save for things like retirement and emergency funds?
At NerdWallet, we recommend that people save 15% of their income for retirement. Okay? That's a huge amount for some people. They're going to take a look at that and there's no way. I can't do that. The reality is you need to start somewhere, even if it's 1 or 2%, and move up from there. So we just want you to get started. You don't have to go to 15% right away. And by the way, that 15% can include your company match, which can help a lot. Now, if you want to retire early, you might have to save even more than 15%, but that's sort of the, where we have people aim in general. And there's lots of ways to boost it over time. Some 401ks these days have an automatic escalation feature. In other words, you sign up for, say, 1 or 2 or 3% now, and every year, every quarter, or whatever, they pop it up another percentage point. Or you can commit to saving half your next raise. If you're getting a 3 or 4% raise, save 1.5 or 2% of that and just set it aside. That way the money's coming out in the future. It's not coming out of your paycheck that you have today. And we know that we're much better at saving money in the future than we are actually doing it in real time. So using those little tricks can help. That's retirement savings. And that's really important. But you also need some money for dealing with the day-to-day stuff. You can call that an emergency fund, rainy-day fund, whatever the label that you want to attach to it. But it's basically savings for stuff that comes up, the unexpected. You hear sometimes people saying that they need 3 months worth of expenses or 6 months worth of expenses or a year. And that's kind of crazy for most people. It's going to take a few years to build up to that level of savings. Even 3 months worth of savings can take an average family about 2 years. And you don't want to put off a bunch of other more important stuff like paying off debt, saving for retirement, taking care of your life today. So what we recommend is that you start with a mini emergency fund. $500 is enough to get started. There's a lot of little emergencies that pop up that are about that amount. You also might have heard the Federal Reserve say that 4 out of 10 adults can't come up with $400 for an emergency. So we're putting it a little bit beyond that. Make your first goal $500 to make sure you do have that cash. Your next goal can be $2,000. That's the size of the typical big economic shock that happens to most families, according to Pew Research. So $2,000 is your second goal. Then your next goal after that can be the 1 month savings. And then once you have that, you can build up from there. The key part of all of this is to keep going. A lot of people put money aside for an emergency. The emergency happens, the money's gone, and they think they failed somehow because the money isn't there any longer. So this is not a goal where you have this, one number and you hit it and you stay there. This is a rinse and repeat kind of thing. You put the money aside, you use it, you put it aside, you use it. You just try to build up over time rather than think you're going to be hitting that 3 months worth target right out of the gate. Retirement and emergency funds are the top two, but people have lots of other goals. So if you want to buy a house, for example, you need to save at least some money for that down payment. If you've got kids, you should strongly think about putting something aside for their college education, because we're seeing how education makes a huge difference in terms of who's staying in the middle class and moving up and who isn't. So it doesn't have to be a 4-year degree necessarily, and you certainly don't have to pay for all of it. But just putting a little money aside has shown that that actually encourages kids to consider and to follow through and to actually go to college. So even if it's just $25 per month per kid, you put it in a 529 plan, that's a college savings plan. You get that set up, again, make it automatic so you don't have to think about it. And then you start hitting up your relatives. So instead of buying the kids a lot of plastic toys, how about a little contribution to the 529?
So saving money is one thing, but what about spending money that you don't have? According to the Federal Reserve, consumer credit card debt has reached $1.1 trillion, with each American household carrying an average of nearly $7,000. Whether you're above that average or below it, debt is something you want to get ahead of. Here's Liz with some tips on how you can pay off your debt and what to focus on first.
When people really realize how much debt they have and they panic, they often do the wrong thing. So what we want people to do is step back and take a look at their whole financial situation. That's why we talk about retirement savings all the time at NerdWallet. If you've got a company match in your 401k, you need to be taking advantage of that. That is free money. So don't walk past that. That's something that's super important. And also that starter emergency fund that I talked about. Having a little bit of emergency money is really important because that can keep you from continuing to dig. When you're in debt, you need to stop digging and stop going farther down. Having that little bit of an emergency fund can help. So once you've got the match, once you've got the starter emergency fund, then you look for your toxic debt. And your toxic debt is the stuff that's high interest rate, variable interest rate. It's stuff like credit cards, payday loans, title loans, anything with a high interest rate. That's the debt you should be focusing on and getting rid of first. And there are a couple ways you can approach it. One is you can target the smallest debt first. That gives you that sense of accomplishment that can keep you going. If you're the mathematical type, if you like spreadsheets, you're an engineer, whatever, the highest interest rate debt is the one that you want to go for first because that will get you out of debt faster. So pick the approach that works, target that debt, pay the minimums on the other stuff, and just throw as much money as you can into paying down those toxic debts. After that, it's going to be a matter of balancing your other financial requirements. You probably need to be saving more for retirement. You need to be thinking about saving for the kids. You need to be thinking about down payment. All those other goals come into play once you get that toxic debt out of your life. You don't really need to be in a huge rush to pay off a mortgage or student loans typically. Those are not super high rate debt. A lot of times they have a tax advantage. So that's not something you need to sweat for most people, getting that paid off in a hurry. It's a toxic debt that we want people to concentrate on. One thing that's important to keep in mind is that sometimes there are levels of debt that are simply unmanageable. There are some debts that no honest man can pay, to quote Bruce Springsteen. So if you've got a debt level where your debts are taking up more than 40% of your income to pay, and that's including your shelter, your rent, or your mortgage, if you're at that level now and you're struggling, if you're borrowing from one debt to pay another, like from one credit card to pay another, if you're getting called by collection agencies, you might be at that point. We typically say if your total debt equals 50% or more of your income, that's a bad sign. Now, it's possible you can dig your way out, but most likely you're going to need some other debt solution, whether it's bankruptcy, credit counseling, something like that to help you get out of the situation that you're in.
With the rise of subscription services, targeted advertising, and one-click purchasing, now more than ever, it's easier to spend online. It seems like everyone from millionaires to broke college students are wondering, where is all of my money going? Here's Liz again with some practical tips on how to curb the temptation of spending money online when you don't have the budget for it.
Keep in mind that everyone around you is trying to move towards frictionless spending. They want to make it easier for you to spend. So you kind of have to be smarter than the tactics that are being thrown at you. Just think about Amazon, that one-click spending. Everything that takes the friction out is going to make it easier for you to have the impulse and then act on it. So what you need to do is put some barriers between the impulse and the actual act of buying. So in terms of your online buying, don't do the one click. Make sure it does take a little bit of effort to go through and that you can take a little time to look at what's in your basket and go, do I really need that? You might even have a cooling off period, a formal cooling off period. I've heard from a lot of people that have either a 3-day, a week-long, even a 3-week cooling off period between when they put that thing in the basket and when they actually pull the trigger on it. A lot of times you'll come back in a couple of days and you don't even want that thing anymore. So again, putting some roadblocks is really important. And maybe take a look at where you're spending your time online, since that's where a lot of shopping is happening. Are you going to sites that are pushing you to spend? A lot of sites make money if you click through and buy whatever the thing they're recommending is. You're spending a lot of time on those sites. You're facing a lot of temptations. Also go through your email. What kind of newsletters are coming into your in basket? Is this something that you really need to be looking at all the time, or is it just encouraging you to buy? Once you start looking around and actually seeing how often you're being pitched, it's a little bit unnerving, but you do have to take positive steps to try to get some of that out of your life, to put that barrier between you and the impulse to spend.
If you've ever been trying to pay off debt or save money, you can probably sympathize with this scenario. Let's say you get a year-end bonus of $1,000. You could use that money to build your emergency fund, pay down a credit card balance, or even put it into a 529 college savings plan. But you could also use it to pay for a weekend getaway with your partner or buy yourself something really nice. After all, you haven't had the money to treat yourself in a long time. So how do you make the choice between investing in your future versus investing in life right now, something right in front of you that you know you'll enjoy?
The whole point of financial planning and having a financial plan for your life is that you have some balance. You're able to enjoy your life now, as well as, pay off the past and save for the future. So it is definitely something that you have to work to get. I don't think most people come out with an absolutely balanced financial plan right off the bat, or they probably wouldn't be listening to this podcast. So what we tell people at NerdWallet, we really like the 50-30-20 budget. And this means that you take your after-tax income and 50% of that is what goes to your must-have expenses. That would be shelter, utilities, food, childcare, insurance, minimum loan payments, the stuff you have to pay or there's a significant and real downside. It's not something you can put off. So those must-haves, if you keep those to about 50% of your after-tax income, that leaves you enough room to do the wants and the saving and debt payment. So 20% is for savings and for debt repayment, extra payments on those loans and payments for 401ks and emergency saving. And then the 30% is your wants. That's the fun stuff. It's the travel, clothes, eating out, really enjoying your life. When I first did this, I think we had 75 or 80% of our after-tax income was going towards the needs side. And I don't think that's unusual. I think a lot of people are way out of balance there because they don't know what to spend when they're out there getting their first apartment or, buying a car or whatever. So it's way out of balance and you feel it because you can't live your life. You can't save the way you want to. You can't pay debt the way you want to. And you're like, what's going on? So that's why we recommend this 50-30-20. It works across all kinds of different situations. And with that 30%, you can actually live your life and not worry about stinting something else. You're taking care of everything else. When you're way out of balance, though, it can take a while to get there. And sometimes it's that wants category that has to be sacrificed because you still want to be saving for retirement. You still want to be saving for emergencies and paying off the debt. So sometimes that wants gets squeezed. But once you get that budget in balance, it's going to feel great. You actually have the money to do some fun things and know that you're taking care of the future as well.
The Tony Robbins podcast is directed by Tony Robbins and produced by the Tony Robbins editorial team, with audio editing and sound design by Jeremy Enns. Today's guest was Liz Weston, a certified financial planner and columnist at NerdWallet. To hear more from her, look her up on NerdWallet at www.nerdwallet.com.
Lớn giữa người nghèo và người giàu là quan niệm của họ về tiền bạc. Thông thường, người nghèo nghĩ về tiền đi kèm với những suy nghĩ tích cực. Tuy nhiên, người nghèo biết rằng tiền cũng có những mặt tốt đẹp. Đó là nó không hề phân biệt đối xử. Nó không quan tâm đến màu da hay chủng tộc của bạn, cũng như bạn thuộc giai cấp nào, bố mẹ bạn làm gì và thậm chí bạn đang là ai. Mỗi ngày đều là một ngày mới, vì vậy dù hôm qua bạn đang làm gì, và bạn có quyền, có cơ hội tương tự như bất cứ ai để nhận lấy nhiều thứ bạn muốn. Điều duy nhất có thể ngăn cản lại chính là bản thân bạn và cách suy nghĩ của bạn về tiền. Richard cho biết ông từng gặp rất nhiều người cực kỳ giàu có và tất cả có một điểm chung, họ đều là những người tuân thủ luật chơi. Họ có thể là quý ông lực lãng, cũng có thể là một kẻ thua lỗ, là nhà thông thái hay một kẻ mất mát đúng nghĩa, là người xứng đáng hay không xứng đáng, nhưng tất cả họ dám bước lên và nói rằng vâng, tôi muốn giàu có. Còn những người nghèo khó là những người nói rằng không cảm ơn, không nhìn cho tôi không xứng đáng, tôi chẳng đáng gì, tôi không thể, tôi không được phép, tôi không nên thế. Vậy, điều đầu tiên bạn cần làm là nuôi dưỡng niềm tin rằng mình cũng có sức mạnh để trở nên giàu có. Thứ hai, thiết lập mục tiêu. Sau khi có định nghĩa, mục đích đến để theo đuổi sự giàu có, việc tiếp theo bạn cần làm là thiết lập mục tiêu và đạt được nó bằng một thời gian biểu, lịch trình của mình. Điều này cũng đơn giản như việc bạn muốn đến một nơi nào đó, bạn sẽ biết bạn phải rời nhà khi nào, bạn sẽ đi đâu, bạn sẽ đi trong bao lâu, bạn sẽ đi đường nào, bạn sẽ làm gì khi đến nơi. Làm giàu cũng tương tự như vậy. Bạn phải biết trước rằng với bản thân bạn, thế nào là giàu có, bạn dự định làm giàu ra sao, bạn dự định sẽ tốn bao nhiêu thời gian, bạn làm được gì hoặc muốn làm gì với số tiền bạn kiếm được. Xác định những mốc cụ thể sẽ khiến con đường đi của bạn trở nên dễ dàng hơn nhiều. Đó có thể là một cái mốc như 40 tuổi tôi sẽ thành triệu phú và tôi sẽ kiếm ra tiền bằng cách điều hành một công ty đầu tư bất động sản. Nhiều người từng có mơ ước hết sức bình thường là muốn trở thành một người rất giàu có và hoặc rất nổi tiếng, thành đạt, nhưng quá ít người xác định rõ mục tiêu, quyết định nó là cái gì, như nào hay như thế nào. Vì vậy, nếu thực sự muốn thành công, giàu có, việc tiếp theo cần làm là phải thành thật với bản thân và đề ra những mục tiêu phù hợp với bạn. Bạn có thể chấp nhận được. Còn tính khả thi thì sao? Hãy cứ bắt tay vào làm, bạn sẽ không biết mình sẽ đi được bao xa nếu không thử cố gắng. Thứ ba, xác định quan niệm của bạn về sự giàu có. Khi bạn đã tin rằng mình có thể trở nên giàu có, vậy với bạn giàu có là gì? Bạn muốn trở nên giàu có thì phải hiểu nó là gì. Nếu không có một khái niệm, làm sao chúng ta giám sát hay đánh giá được sự thành công? Một người bạn tỷ phú của Richard chia sẻ quan niệm thú vị của anh. Giàu có là khi anh sống bằng tiền lãi của lãi từ tiền vốn kinh doanh của mình. Anh ta biết rằng sau mỗi giờ, tiền lãi trên số lãi của anh ta lại tăng lên bao nhiêu. Do vậy, nếu khi đi ăn, anh ta sẽ biết bữa tối hôm nay hết bao nhiêu A. Sau khi ăn tối, anh ta kiếm thêm được bao nhiêu B. Anh ta nói với Richard rằng nếu B lớn hơn A, anh sẽ rất lấy làm hài lòng. Một vài người đã quan niệm giàu có là khi họ không phải lo lắng về tiền bạc, khi họ có đủ tiền trang trải cho mọi trường hợp khẩn cấp, nảy sinh trong gia đình hay cuộc sống của họ. Nếu bạn nghĩ hai quan niệm này là khá chung chung, thì bạn có